Yeah, that's a good question. I really always loved comics. I've always enjoyed it. It took me so long to get into comics. I would hate to leave that fast, even though I spent about 20 years at DC and all that. But it took me about 6 months to a year to get settled, to get relaxed, to get recharged. And honestly, I was working with Frank on a couple of other things. We were just chatting and all that, and we both shared so many similar interests about what we'd like to see with comics and what we wanted to do, and what we felt was missing in the industry, and ultimately how we'd like to make books ourselves. The more we talked about it, the more we came up with some ideas there. Then lo and behold, Frank was able to re-secure the rights to Ronin, which is interesting again for me because I'm at DC for 20 years, and Ronin stood alone and stood apart from everything. Nobody ever really exploited that in another way. And I thought it would be fascinating to go back to that world with Frank. And he actually asked me if I wanted to edit it with him at DC, and I said no. But what I'd much rather do is do it as a separate imprint in our own company and go out there, and that's sort of how this thing came about.
So when you're putting something like this together, one of the big things, there's so many books that are out on the stands right now. I don't think that that's any shock to anyone. Whenever you go into your local comic shop, into your bookstore, there's tons of material that's out. How do you put this together and make sure that Frank Miller Presents is able to stand out on its own to succeed really against everything else that's out there?
Well, there's always been a lot on the shelf, and you have to go with what your best selling point is. So when we were looking at the name of the company, we called the company Frank Miller Presents because that means it's on the cover of every book. And that alone gives you a leg up on so many other companies that are out there just struggling for attention. You have this built-in awareness of Frank, there's a built-in expectation, there's a sensibility, there's a style. And the great part about it is when you go out with his name, it immediately draws attention to what this project is. And I think that's what it is. And then that's actually why we're launching with things like Ronin and Sin City, because these are pre-sold, pre-awareness ideas, and therefore, if people have any interest in those properties, they'll come try us, and hopefully sample the other new books that we're creating.
So speaking of some of those new books, I have to greedily push out, of course, that the Cuber School's own Emma Kubert is out there working on an incredible new book. So would you mind talking about some of the other exciting titles that are out there?
No, we were out there building a pitch, and Frank has a lot of interest in young adult material. And he had an idea for Pandora, a concept behind it. But he knew that he wasn't the person to execute it. He really needed somebody to come in and bring a sensibility to it. Now, I know the Kubert School, I know the Kubert family really well. Andy is a good friend of mine. I've known Emma since she was a kid. And I've watched her style just flourish and grow. I've seen all the books with Inkblot. So when we were talking about Pandora, I brought the book to Frank. And, you got to understand, I have a good friendship with Andy. Frank not only worked with Andy on Dark Knight 3, but he had a good rapport with Joe as well, and he considered Joe one of his great heroes too. So between Joe and Andy, he said it only made perfect sense just to keep that lineage going and keep that going, and working with another Kubert, and he's super excited. It's brought a different sensibility, a different energy, and a different point of view, and it gives that book everything exactly what it needs. And she's just a consummate pro. That's the main thing. She's just one of the great professionals out there with the work ethic and sensibility that is exactly what that series should have.
Are these books going to be distributed through Lunar or Diamond? Or is it going to be going through comic shops?
It's going to be comic shops. Yeah, both Frank and I are traditionalists, so we're very much in the mindset that we want to go the traditional comic route because we're actually trying to find a way to elevate the comic business again. And the fun part is, like the Ronin book, Frank is doing the layouts on Ronin for Philip Tan, and every page is a double-page spread. So it's all double-page spreads, and this beautiful artwork that honestly won't translate well digitally, but it's going to look beautiful on the page. Excited by that. And we're very much into the paper stock and the sensibilities and the quality of the material. And Frank's heavily involved in that. He wants to make sure that every book feels right. And so that's been fun in putting it all together too. So again, we're very much in it. We're going through Diamond. Diamond's excited. They know the success Frank's had. I had a long relationship with them as well. So we have a good rapport. It felt very comfortable to work with them in a good way. And they're behind the books, we're doing 100%, which is exactly what we need, again, to break free of that clutter that's out there in the market right now.
One of the things you just said was, you want to fill in those gaps that you find are lacking in the industry. What do you feel is lacking?
I'm going to say something that's going to, I don't know if it's right or wrong. We want to create books that people want to read.
Yep.
And I say that because when you hear about variant covers and the amount of books with multiple covers on it that are going out there, you realize that people are buying covers, but not for the material itself, they're buying for the artists on the cover. Our goal is to go back, put the craft back in the book, the storytelling, sense of characterization, visuals, strong art. We're actually desaturating the colors on the book. We feel books are oversaturated in colors right now. And I feel that there's just this, you know, it's an interesting thing. When people work on a monitor and work on a screen, the brightness of the screen allows the colors to be very vibrant. But when they translate it to the book itself, it ultimately saturates the page and it gets very murky. And most people aren't recognizing that. They're trying to improve the paper stocks, the page looks better, but we realize sometimes you gotta do less. You gotta pull the colors back and let the art come out more, and let it see, and hold some of those color lines that actually exist, do a foreground, background, things like that. Kind of silly, I know.
It's not silly.
It's radical, but we're trying to bring back some of that craft. You know, it's good to move an industry forward, it's great to move things ahead, but sometimes you gotta understand the basis of why things were done, and then understand whether or not you can break it or change it. But don't just change things for the sake of change, you know, because the computer allows you to do that. Do things that make sense for the quality of the material to make sure the integrity of the material stays true.
That's great. So one of the other questions that's popping up in my head, at least, and I'm sure it's popping up in other folks, is how did FMP really come to you? When were you like, yeah, let's do this? Did he approach you first? Well, I guess you kind of touched on it a little bit.
We touched on it. We played with the idea a lot, and we like I said, and honestly, we've been kicking stuff around for a while, but it was all coming out of anything we were doing coming out of our own pocket. We were sort of like just building it ourselves. I think it became real when the one project I created, which is called Ancient Enemies, we actually pre-sold that as an NFT project, you know, to bring financing into the company with this company called Spiced Out, and they were excited about coming in working with us. And all of a sudden now we realize other people were starting to get interested in what we're doing. We were building it all ourselves for ourselves in a weird way, and then all of a sudden now it became other people were involved, and then we realized we got to get going on this. And the good part is that, you know, Frank has been working with Phil for over a year, and they've got the first issue done on Ronin already, and it's quite spectacular. I mean, some of his best work, and I've worked with Philip for almost 2 decades.
Philip's incredible. Another little homework assignment for you guys, like I told you about Joe before, look up Philip Tanzo. All right, absolutely gorgeous stuff, and he's a super nice guy too. So.
Well, it's interesting because for Philip, I mean, wildly established artist in his own right, but working with Frank, he always calls Frank Sensei, which drives us all crazy. But in his own way, he means it from the heart, and he's learning from it. And Frank's teaching him, and you would appreciate it more than I would, but I appreciate it just as much. They're sitting in rooms having conversations about negative space, about the use of negative space, and this long, deep conversation about how putting less on the page is more to accentuate some of the key moments and bring the characters out alive. And you can see how much what Frank has said, Philip is taking to heart, and how much more his art is popping because of it. You can see this quantum leap in some of his styles. It's been spectacular to watch.
So one of the other really interesting things I was thinking about was, you know, Dan, and when you and Frank come together and the announcement goes out, I imagine you get inundated by people that are trying to now reach out, they want to work with you, they want to bring projects to the door.
It's like today, everybody found my phone number again.
Yeah. I mean, how do you kind of keep the pace where you're just ensuring that the quality of the product that's coming out is up to the standards of what you want it to be?
The good part is, there's 3 principles of the company. It's myself, Frank, and Selene Thomas. And that's the whole company too, by the way, that's it. So we're doing all the work. So there's only so much you can do, number 1. And number 2 is, we never wanted to be big, you know? So the goal is to do what we want to do, what interests us, that challenges us. We're not locked into a style, we're not locked into a story sensibility. If you look at everything, Ronin is this fantasy sci-fi adventure. Pandora's a young adult adventure. Ancient Enemies is probably a more traditional superhero route. and Sin City is film noir. So there's no box to be put in. It's more about the quality of the material and what gets us most excited. So if there's something that comes to us, we'll be more than happy to go forward, but it's not that we're actively looking for material. And I'm going to say this, and this is the other side, we're artists first. And this is something I talked about back at DC for a while, but in this case, we get to implement it because we're actually in control of it. It's artists first, meaning we want to make sure the art excites us and then build a product for the artist more so than start to just slap things together.
What have you found to be the biggest challenges of all this coming together? I'm sure it's
the biggest challenge is when you work in comics for 20 years and then you actually have to actually make comics. It's a whole lot different. I used to have a staff of 160 people doing this. Now I'm doing it all myself.
It's true.
It's a lot of work, man.
When do the books start hitting the shelves?
First one's out in November. We've targeted the Wednesday before Thanksgiving for the first issue of Ronin and the first issue of Ancient Enemies. But we're hoping to put out an Ashcan, which is what I'm working on right now. That's also a lot of fun. I did my first book map. You know what I'm saying? Did my first book map, and we're hoping to have that out by August.
I'm gonna just see if anybody has any questions going. Okay, we got some questions.
Oh, you're gonna need a mic. I didn't think she needed a mic, but it's not in here.
I have two. One, how many books being distributed?
Right.
And two, are you in a position where I can fit to maybe say hi comics game?
What's that?
Are you in a position where I can videotape and you can say hi comics game?
I don't say hi to anybody. Here's the two things. We're being distributed by Diamond, and I'm going to say this quite honestly. We're here to entertain. I'm hoping to entertain everybody, if you want to be perfectly honest. And the goal is, Frank and I unfortunately remember the days when comics used to sell hundreds of thousands of copies to everybody out there. And that's our goal, is to be as accessible and open to as many people to enjoy the comics as much as possible.
We have another question over here.
Hi, Dan. Last year I tried to find you, but I did not realize that you were doing panels. I thought you had like booths like everybody else.
I don't like to sit down in a booth. I can't sit still long. Everybody knows that. This is a lot for me right now.
Okay. I wanted like an autograph off of you for when the TV cast for Arrow was here, but I'm not sure if you'd be willing to sign a book today, or?
I think we can do that. Let me check my hand. Yeah, it still works. Okay, yeah, we're good.
All right. Can I get it after when the panel's over?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
So what I want to say then is, I'm sorry. There's another question. My apologies.
Sorry, it's a wide stage.
By the way, we're doing that on purpose. We're going to go back and forth. That's the way. So somebody raise their hand over here next, just to make sure we keep you running.
Get your steps. Okay, so I totally get it. I have ADHD. I'm having a hard time standing still right now. I'm like up in my
There's so much to see and do,
I know,
right?
I want to like run around and do stuff.
Yeah.
But a dream of mine has always been to create my own comic series, even though I've never really been into comics. It's not that I wanted to do comics, is that I wanted a story and I wanted to tell it, whether that be video games, animation,
Right.
And now that I watched the Batman movie, and as you can see from me dressed as the Riddler, I got a little obsessed and I started reading and buying Batman comics, and I'm kind of just, I feel very, not lost, but like excited in the comic world. There's so much to really get.
That's the hardest. The hardest part about it is there's so much out there.
Yeah,
That's the thing. So what we used to do, everybody, is focus on what interests you most. Look for the graphic novels first, because it's that way you get a complete story. You get a whole reading experience out of it and go from there. Listen, I was the same way, except my big jump was the Spider-Man cartoon in the 60s. But and I still have my first comic I got, which is Spider-Man 40, because Green Goblin was on the cover, and I love that character. And so I know what you're saying, and what it is you start small, you stay focused on the thing you like, and then you start to expand. Because all of a sudden, the dots start to connect and they pull you out wider. And I started reading 1 or 2 comics, and at my peak, I was probably buying about 50 comics a month.
Oh my goodness.
I know, it's really ridiculous when you think about it.
And I have one more question. What advice would you give to someone who wanted to start making their own comic books? Like, what would you say to start? Because I know like starting with a zine was something that I was recommended, like something small.
The zines are, it's interesting you say the zines, because the zines are ways to even meet other people. Do you know what I say? You find people with like mindsets and you find ways to collaborate. Comics are best when you find somebody good to collaborate with and really help build it, build the idea. These aren't built for working in bubbles. These are built, really, as you see, it's community. So the more you get involved in people and hear the interest, the better it is to build a story. For you, it's to get the initial ideas, the initial concepts down on paper. But what's your story about? What do you want to talk about? What's in you that's driving you to want to write? What's the real goal of your piece? Get that down, and then find a way to start to build that story out, and then find people that might be interested in publishing or working with you on that like story, and then you do follow that path until you get a way to get out. The good part is, in today's world, you can get anything out. You can self-publish, you can put it online, you have your own website, you put it online yourself. You can go and try a Kickstarter. You can go try and put it on one of the web channels and all those things on there. You can try to push it to another company. Depends on what works best. For you is to see what type of story you want to tell and who's telling similar style stories so that you can line yourself up with somewhat of a like mindset and hopefully help, get a champion to push your project forward.
Okay, thank you so much.
So like I said, I was going to keep this as short as possible and keep it moving quick. So what I want to just kind of close this up with is get us excited. Give us that extra teaser to get us ready to go for FMP.
You know what? It's interesting because today, what we did right before we came to the show, we started to put some of the art in. And Philip Tan's art on Ronin started to get out there, and I saw that level of excitement come from that. And again, people didn't know what to expect. We put out 3 pieces of art. We put Philip Tan doing Ronin. We did Emma Kubik doing Pandora, which is a soft, beautiful, beautiful piece. And then we put out Mila Manera doing Sin City. And again, 3 wildly different directions, 3 wildly different styles. And I think that encapsulates what we're doing at FMP the most, is that you're not going to come in here to get pigeonholed. You're going to come, the only thing that unites all the concepts and ideas is the quality of the material and the fun and excitement the story brings. And the goal is, if one book works for you, great. If one book doesn't work for you, that's okay too. That's the reason why we're going all these directions in different flavors. And again, we're going to constantly push things out. Some of the stuff that we're looking at and developing, we have a gothic romance. I got a gothic romance over here. I've got a voodoo book over there. I mean, so it's like, so there's a little bit of stuff that's, you can't classify it, and that's why Frank's name is so important, because he's not that easy to classify either, given the breadth of his work too, and that's why we want to be reflective of his career and the type of material that we create.
I mean, it's all the different flavors. That's what everybody wants.
Yeah.
So there's something out there for everybody.
Well, like I said, if you look at the convention here, just look at the floor. There's not one thing driving this. This used to be a heavy anime show. Then this became a comic book show, and now it's everything. It's a pop culture show. And, you see the people running to see Cobra Kai right over here. Then you got these people dressed in anime over there. And then you got a little bit of, I'm more surprised about how little the superhero effect is in this room right now than it is anything else. But that's both good and bad. But you see everything that's happening. One thing you realize is that there's going to be over 100,000 people here this weekend, and of course they're brought here for a reason, and they enjoy the pop culture aspect, they enjoy the entertainment that comes along with it. So therefore, our goal is to be able to attract as many of them as possible with as many different ways as possible.
For folks that are interested in FMP, is there a website or anything that they can make sure that
we're going to have that'll be all set up by August. The books are in November. I didn't want to start too soon because we didn't have that much material to put on. So we're going to launch a website as soon as we start to solicit these books, and that way we'll be able to refresh it with new art and information going forward from there.
That's great. So guys, like you said, November, make sure you let your comic shops know now. These are the books that you want. These are the books that you need. Make sure you put in the request now. Dan, thank you so much for coming on up, chatting with me for a little bit, and talking with the folks, answering the questions. Guys, like I said, if you want to swing on by the Cuban School booth, we're at booth 900. It's right behind you. Just look for the big blue background with the nib on it. Come on by, say hello. We're really glad to chat with you. Tomorrow, come on by. I believe it's at 4 o'clock. We're going to have a special guest, Ken Lashley, over here, and he's going to be talking and chatting it up with us as well. So, Dan, thank you so much. I wish you nothing but the best as always.
Thanks, Andy. Always a pleasure, man.